What's good, everyone? My name is Nick Ingval, and welcome to the Outside the Box podcast, where my goal is to give you a different way to think about sneakers. Now, if you're just joining me for the first time, this podcast has been around for quite a while under a couple of different variations. Way back in 2015, I started this podcast with my friends Jacques Slade and Brandon Edler, and we ran into some snags with our schedules and our jobs that kept us from keeping up on the podcast, and eventually it took a break. Now, fast forward a couple of years, Jacques and I connected with Tiffany Beers, who you might know from designing the Nike mag, and we had a great run for a year or so, and eventually ran into similar snags and similar issues on scheduling, and eventually it went on hiatus once again. But I'm really excited to bring it back and give it some new life and really focus on a different way to think about sneakers and the world of sneakers, the people behind the scenes that make things happen, the people that have turned their passion into a way to provide income for themselves and their families. So Outside the Box is getting a fresh start, starting with this episode. And of course, I couldn't think of a better person to start this episode than my friend Jacques Slade, who helped me from the very beginning with this podcast. So naturally, we wanted to talk about some of the things that he's done throughout his amazing career. I'm not even joking, amazing career that really helped establish him as one of the most, one of the most respected voices and people in the sneaker game. So I go through a variety of topics with Jacques, and we talk about how he got started making YouTube videos. We talk about how you've got to really be focused and not on the wrong things, because eventually you're going to be a creator and nobody's going to care what you create, whether you're just starting out or really, really successful and have all the numbers and money and followers and all that. Sometimes people just don't care. And that's a challenge that I wanted to talk to him about. In addition, we talk about getting invited to the ESPY Awards, dealing with overzealous editors, how to build relationships that foster success for each other, the difference between being an influencer and a brand partner, and some of his goals, which includes directing a sneaker commercial. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. I'm really excited to relaunch the podcast. And I just want to thank you for tuning in, for checking it out. And if you like what you see, hit that like button, subscribe, leave us a review, drop us a comment, all those things. I really, truly appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into this incredible conversation with my friend Jacques Slade.
Let's see.
It's nice.
Yeah, this is nice, man.
Oh, is this working? Oh, it's
No,
been a while, huh?
I need to be on sneaker on podcasts with Nick Ingval more often. This is nice.
Man, so what's good, man? How you been? It's good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. I'm good. Surviving the pandemic. I'm out, fighting zombies. I'm good.
Feels like it, right, man? It's nonstop. Every day is something new.
Yes, it's like it's zombies one day, witches, warlocks. Like it's all here. Like you get it all during the pandemic. There is no escaping all the things I saw in the movies as a kid. At this point in 2020, we are fighting for our lives. Basically.
Exactly. So, I just decided, since I'm stuck inside and trying to avoid getting people sick, even though, I've been lucky and I haven't gotten sick, that I'd kind of revamp Outside the Box. And I figured if I'm going to do that, I have to talk to you, because not only were we the last, along with Tiffany a year and a half ago, plus back in 2019.
Yeah.
But you and I and Brandon Edler started this technically in 2015. So,
man,
5 years later, third time's a charm, hopefully.
Right.
We'll see, hopefully.
See if we can keep it going.
But I figured this would be kind of a cool way to reintroduce the podcast, but also give the people that are subscribed specifically to this podcast a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more personal conversation with you, because that's one thing that I think we missed out in doing this back in the day, where we didn't really give people, the kind of full background, so to speak, of each of us that were hosting it over the years.
Yeah.
So for me, I always think of the first time that I met you was in LA, uh, at I want to say it was a Sneaker Pimps event. And if I remember right, it was the Sneaker Pimps event that the game was supposed to perform at and then backed out of. I don't
Gosh,
know if you remember that.
I don't remember. I remember Sneaker Pimps, but I don't remember who was supposed to perform. I definitely remember the Sneaker Pimps, though. Yeah,
Yeah, they had like that chain link fence display and a bunch
yeah,
of
with
weird
all the
shoes up
shoes.
there.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
so cool. I loved
Yeah.
that. I loved
Yeah.
that.
And I think that was kind of as crazy as it sounds, that was kind of the end of like the big Foot Locker Foot Action partnership, right? I can't remember
Yeah,
when that kind of shifted, but once SneakerCon came into play
yeah,
and all
it's
these
kind of
other,
what.
Dunk Exchange and all that came in,
Yeah,
it shifted the whole landscape for what a sneaker event was. But that was
yeah.
really a cool event. And I just remember thinking, I think at that time, man, I must have been at Soul Collector because I had to have been living in LA, which would have
Gosh,
been
what
like
year? What year was that?
2010,
That was 2010. So I was at
maybe 2009.
I was at Kicks on Fire, I think. Yeah, I was at Kicks on Fire. Definitely. If it was 2010, I was at definitely at Kicks on Fire. Gosh, man, that was so long ago. Oh,
Right? So much has changed
now,
since then.
yeah,
I
so much
mean,
has changed in the world of sneakers. Like, wow.
just think of like the blogs back then, right? Like, I think obviously you were writing for Kicks on Fire at that time, and then fast forward to today, occasionally you write, but like that's a very small piece of,
Of what I
it's like
do.
cherry on top, if anything,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
YouTube has
yeah.
taken over your entire life essentially. So,
Basically, essentially. Yeah, like I just wrote something for Complex recently, and I was like, "Am I doing this right? Do I? Is this how you put a sentence together? I don't remember. Does this make sense? Does this flow?" And they were going. I saw them going through it, editing it, and I was like, "Yeah, just tear it apart, tear it. Just do it, just do it. Just break it apart and rebuild it. Let's make it bigger, better, stronger." I was just like, "Man, I'm so out of practice," but it was good. It was good to kind of get back in there.
yeah, definitely. Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Like, you can be a writer, but that doesn't necessarily mean your words translate into what gets published, especially when you're writing for a big publication like Complex, right? There's so many
Yeah,
people that are editing and suggesting things and saying, that doesn't really work, but let's talk about this. And by the time it's done, it's still 70 to 80% of you, but there's a lot of things that have been changed and massaged to hopefully be better by the end of it. Um,
yeah. This is where you see the if you get on Twitter and you like hashtag writers, you look up the frustration with editors and editor in chief versus like taking apart what you've written and kind of rewriting it in their own vision, and just using you as a vessel. More or less, and that's where like the real pure writer, you see the frustrations that they have. Luckily for me, I'm not that dedicated to my writing, so I'm not married that too much to it. I think if they change the sentiment of it, I would have a problem. But if they're making changes, I always feel like, oh yeah, make it better, make it better. I know like my writing is crap. Can we cuss on this podcast? Can I say
yeah,
like
yeah, of course, of course.
because my writing is shit. So I felt really British saying my writing is shit, isn't it? So yeah, I really gotta like yeah. So I just kind of just go with the flow because generally they're making my writing better.
Yeah, I mean, and that's always the intention, right? Like, it's never. I've been on both sides of that coin many times, and it's really tough because your ego always wants to think that, like, hey, this is the best. I did it the right
Yeah,
way,
right.
regardless of what you're doing, right? Like, whether
Absolutely.
it's a YouTube video or writing or just even like social media posts. I think like people don't realize like a lot of people have teams of people, you know,
Yeah.
working on that, right? So it's one of those things too, like especially on the social media side, you see people that are, social media managers, community managers and that, but
Mm.
to really have people that get the nuances of something like Twitter or Instagram or memes or any of those
Yeah.
like things,
Yeah.
sometimes it takes it takes, well, occasionally you run into a superstar at that stuff, but usually it's three or four people going back and forth deciding, is this the right thing? How can we make this a little bit edgier, a little bit more, catchy, or something
Yep.
that's a little bit more current or relevant to a particular topic. And I think that, across everything, right, it's really tough to it's tough to find people that you want to work with, that you trust where they're coming from, and that they're not going to steer you wrong of where you want to go, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
that's actually something that I think, you know, the few times, the couple of times that we've tried to do this podcast, and we did it for a good length of time both times, right? But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that was the one thing that I really appreciated about our conversations. And you and I obviously offline have these conversations all the time, but like, that's what makes a great kind of back and forth and conversation, is the fact that you have that trust with people. And
Yeah.
I think that it takes a lot to get to that,
Mm-hmm.
with people, right? I
It
think that
does.
had you and I started a podcast in 2010 when we first met, it might not have turned out as good for anybody. And it might have changed the dynamic of our relationship over time, right? It was just
Yeah.
such a different world then. And I think over time, obviously you and I have built a lot of trust with each other. And I think when we've brought people into this, or taken a different direction with our content, whether it be the podcast or YouTube or whatever, there's always an understanding there of like, no, this is what's got to be done right now. And
Yeah.
okay, let's shift and go this way. And hey, maybe this is not the right time to push this. So I guess one thing that I would like to get into a little bit is thinking about some of those moments where, we got to in your journey, where I was kind of on the other side of that, right? Where I mean, I feel like we pitched ideas to 100 people minimum over the years, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
we would have those marathon phone calls and
Yeah.
just be like, okay, who can put the money up? Who can give us the, shoes to do this? Who can give us the space to do this? What is this? What are all the pieces that have to come together for this idea? But before we go into that, how did you really get into the sneaker world? Like, what was that first kind of opportunity for you, and what did that look like? Because obviously most people now know you, and it's like, you're the superstar, YouTuber. And
Right.
I think there's a long journey for you to get to that point, and I don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
like
yeah.
have people forgetting that that's what it takes. So tell us a
Yeah,
little bit
my
about that.
my entry into the world, into the, I guess, like the professional world of sneakers, was through Kicks on Fire. So I was out of a job, looking for just like random work, and Jazzare, who I'm sure, well, maybe not all of you, a lot of you may know Jazzare, big sneakerhead, and she worked for Kicks on Fire, and they were looking for some additional writers. And while I was looking for work, she was like, "Yo, we got this opening. Do you want to write about kicks?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, make a little extra money on the side. Obviously, it was great back then. And yeah, I just started writing. I was writing 5 posts a day for $5 a piece. I was making like $25 a day, writing about sneakers.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that now. Like,
Yeah,
it's a lot of work for $5. If
yeah,
anybody's
yeah.
done like
Especially
a
even
blog
back
post,
then.
yep,
Yeah, even back then, you had to remember to tag and do all these sorts of things. But it was exciting back then. It was still really new. It wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot of people doing it, so you were really a part of a unique club. And
yeah,
shout out to Kicks on Fire. Shout out to Khan. He kind of he that job set me up to be where I am now. So if I hadn't have done that, I don't think I would be here doing what I'm doing now.
yeah, yeah. Well, so I guess to go a little bit further into that, I remember having the conversations with you around making videos back then
Mm-hmm.
for, basically the same price. What
Yes.
now, were you making any kind of video content prior to that, or was that kind of like, I'm just going to start doing this? I mean, obviously you're a creative person, you've done a lot of different things, so I'm sure things existed, but not in a consistent way, right?
Yeah. So I had I done any? I don't think I had put anything on YouTube before then that I had done myself. Like I had made a rap music video, um, but I don't think outside of that, I don't think I had done anything else on my own channel. Um, yeah, I think that was the first time. So when I started doing videos for Kicks on Fire, that's when things started. That's kind of that was the start of like my YouTube career, so to speak. That was the most consistent thing that I had done, and I think that was in I'm going to say March of 2010 is when I put up my first video for Kicks on Fire. And that kind of came out of being into photography and then kind of watching what was happening on YouTube and like wondering like why isn't Kicks on Fire doing something on YouTube? What's the problem? And then that kind of sparked the YouTube sort of revolution that you see now with those sneakers.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, at that point, you probably only have, Rich, Kicks in the City, and maybe
Yeah,
Franelations that had done
yeah,
any
yeah.
type of sneaker stuff on YouTube.
There was Rich doing stuff. Fran was doing stuff, and then what's the other guy's name? Kicks. I can't remember his name. Which I feel terrible about that. There was another guy doing it pretty consistently too. Gosh, I can't think of his name now. But there were only like three people, and like Kicks on Fire had done some stuff, but it was really inconsistent, and it was really like very poorly done. Same thing with like Nice Kicks, and like no one was really doing it or treating it seriously back then. Everybody was kind of like, well, we'll just throw this up there, kind of thing. Like we'll
Yeah.
just do it just because we have access to it. Because back then it was still like about print, more or less back then. It hadn't transitioned to like social and web and all that stuff. So it was still a very like print based world and like words and writing. It wasn't about video. That the video revolution, so to speak, hadn't happened yet.
Yeah. I mean, for me at that time, I think I was probably working with Soul Collector, and yeah, we were still pretty much focused on print, right? We weren't thinking about video hardly at all.
Yeah,
I think part of that was just because at the time too, the entry point to creating content online was pretty expensive to do it in a professional level way, right? So as
that's
Soul
true.
Collector,
That's
the
true.
print magazine, you know, we were really really focused on that experience of the print magazine being a
Yeah,
wow factor, right? And the pictures that the team was taking back then, Nick DePaula and Steve Mulholland and all those guys, and Zach, those were all, that was such a the bar was so high for the standard for Soul Collector, right? That was the challenge
yeah.
for us in like thinking about what video content could be. So, and on top of that, there was only like 10 of us in total that I think that actually worked for Soul Collector and got a paycheck, and it was very minimal at that. And I
Oh
think,
wow.
to really, even prior to that, I had worked for Nice Kicks, right? And I think, even with Matt and, having the photo stuff for Matt, like he did so good with the photography back then. I remember first time I ever saw the like plastic acrylic kind of like photo setup that he had in the office, and
Mm,
just being blown away, like this guy's taking sneaker photos on this. But then
right.
that became a standard for so many retailers and so many people. But I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
I think it was also like the return on the investment, right? You could take pictures and do a blog post in a couple of hours, but with, a video, especially with nobody really knowing how to edit, and, I mean, just thinking of like my laptop at that time, I would have been able to hold one video on the laptop before the hard drive was full, even
Yeah,
even at
that's
like
true.
720p or something like that. It would have
That's
been just
true.
incredibly expensive for me to go down that path. So how did that go for you? Like with Khan and with Kicks on Fire, did you just say like, I'm just going to try to do this? Or was it like a back and forth of like, hey, are we doing this? Like, what was the kind of tipping off of that whole change for you?
I think he kind of gave me free reign to kind of do like, cause at that point, like I had kind of rose in the ranks, so to speak, at Kicks on Fire. And so I just started making videos. I just kind of did it on my own. Like I was like, I have this idea, I want to make it. And so I did the first one, and he was like, cool, but I don't think even he didn't see the value in it back then. And so I think it probably took me a month or so before I did the next one or something like that, before they started being a little more consistent. And that whole time I was like pressing him for money, like to pay me to do these things. And it just wasn't a priority for him. He didn't see the value in it. And I think, I ended up got $35 a video, I think it was, which is insane for anybody. Even, it was just an insane amount of work for that amount of money. But at the end of the day, it led me here, so I can't complain too much about it. But
Yeah.
and it also helped, I think, change the trajectory. I think obviously I feel like sneakers would have gotten into video at some point, but I think that the differentiation, what, I don't know what I'm trying to use big words on the podcast. Yeah, trying to use big words on podcasts to sound intelligent. People are watching this and go like, we can look and see the truth. Yeah, like it set me apart from everyone else that was doing sneaker stuff. And so like that kind of became my lane. And I think people started to see the value in it. Like, oh, like people, like brands and retailers were messing with me because I was doing that sort of video. And I think, money talks. And so, other people were like, wait a minute, there's a check here. Let's find out how to get this check.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long you think how long you think it took you to edit that first video for $35?
I don't know. I would imagine. I mean, because it was the first time, between shooting it and editing it and trying to light it, like it was days. Like it was to get it all together. It took days. Like learning how to light, getting the blanket, memorizing the script, writing out the script, all of that stuff. And you can even see that, when you watch the video, it's so cringy. Like I memorized it barely, and you can see me going, and the Nike, like it's just so bad. But yeah, it probably took days. And then like each one of those back then, it's probably taken me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours to get a video done each time.
Yeah. Do you remember what camera you shot that on?
I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember it was it was a small point and shoot. I don't remember the exact name of it. I don't have it. I don't have it anymore. I have some old point and shoots, but none of those are the actual one that I used.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, no.
How did that turn into, you mentioned the brands wanting to work with you and seeing something there, right? Do you remember like either the first time you either got in touch with a brand or maybe even got a free pair of shoes to do a video?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the first people that reached out to me was Jordan Brand. This was when Josh Benetic was there. I think he was the first one to reach out to me, and I think he was the first person that invited me to a press trip. I think either they invited Khan and Khan sent it to me, or they invited me directly. But I think that was the first time. I think this was 2011. I think it was 2011 was the first time I went on a press trip, or maybe it might have been late 2010, but somewhere between 2010 and 2011, it was my first press trip and like the first time that they started sending me stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's such a different world now where there's so many events going on at all time. I mean, outside of pandemic, but I think it was such a big deal back then too, because there was only a handful of things that I think as a sneaker blogger or a sneaker YouTuber, when those terms weren't really familiar, right?
Yeah.
Getting access to anything was the key, right? Because like you said, there was a very small group of people that got to do this stuff. And I mean, fast forward a few years and I always come back to you and I sitting next to each other at the ESPY Awards, listening to Robin Roberts and like, just like looking at each other like, how the
how did we get here? How do we get
and
here?
we're wearing sneakers and suits and we're at the ESPY games. Like it was like I mean I get goosebumps just thinking about it right now because it's
Yeah.
just like, you know, I'm sure you probably have this similar family thing where nobody really understood sneakers, right? They just were like,
No.
well, Jacques just doing Jacques stuff, and like, you know, I'm just glad he's not getting into too much trouble anymore. Like that's basically
Right.
how my parents
Yeah.
always look at sneakers.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. No.
so
It's crazy that sneakers has been able to take us to where we are today. I would have never. I would never have imagined it. But now the next generation, they see like, oh, we were able to do this. Like, how much further is the next generation going to go with sneakers? So it's going to be pretty crazy.
yeah, definitely, and I think it's broader too, right? There's outliers that you know my work in this whole world now has turned into helping the smaller people, right? And trying to
Mm-hmm.
find people that, you know, maybe wouldn't be able to afford to put me on like a full salary. You know, if I was to take a full salary
Right.
at any job again, like the last time I did that is, you know, StockX. So I haven't been there in
Yeah.
2.5 years. And
Right.
even then, like, you know, it's tough because like you want to be a part of these bigger things, and like I think you and I have talked about this a lot, but like what was kind of, as this all progressed for you, where did where was your thought process around, can I do this for Jordan Brand directly, or can I do this for Nike or Adidas directly? And
Mm.
you know, what kept you, I guess, like independent? You know, obviously you work with all these
Yeah.
brands at some point or another
Yeah.
along the way, but like what made you decide to kind of stay in your own lane with all of this?
I think when I mean, I feel like you could see the value of what I was doing, and I knew there was value to it, especially as the production quality and things like that started to step up. And I had to find a way to really make my own individual voice, and I think the audience responded to that voice, and so I just had to find I had to find what was making me unique. And once I found that, and what it was about me that was unique, that's when I started to reach out to the brands and like pitch ideas. And then you would see them do things and you'd be like, that was cool, but here's an idea. I like this, or you can improve it this way. And like a lot of it started out that way, where they would do something and I would hit them up like, yeah, like thanks for invite. This was cool. Would have been more impactful if this would happen, or if X would have happened, or could you do this way next time? Or when you consider the lighting, like the dark room with the soloing, the shoes looks great physically, but it looks terrible on video, and that's kind of where things are going. So if you have a brightly lit room, that's going to have a bigger impact, and more people are going to be able to see your product in a way that that makes it, they can really see the details and things like that. And so like that's kind of how it started for me, and I kind of grew from there, where I would just put together like a whole pitch deck on how I thought they could roll out the next shoe, and I would send that to brands, and they would be, obviously a lot of that stuff didn't happen, but some of it did. That's how like the Blake Griffin thing happened in Santa Monica. Like I pitched the idea of like doing a live with Blake and linking up with sneakerheads around the country via Google Live or Google whatever it was called back then, and broadcasting that to the world. And that that happened. But it was an idea I had that I emailed to a brand, and they were for it.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean I think we just take the same approach with this, right? Like there's PR people and then there's brand people, and you can, with PR people, you know, to some extent you have to play the game of like you're playing nice and you're, you know, wanting to be
Yeah,
involved with whatever they're doing. And the best of those people are very open to the criticism and the feedback and like the
yeah,
suggestions. And then you get to the brand people who actually put in the work to make all that happen, and not just the person that was the conduit to the YouTube, the influencer world, right? And I think
yeah,
that's kind of, you know, been my thing too, is like just building relationships further beyond what you see at those events, right? Because it's a tough
Yeah.
thing to do and it takes a lot of time, but it can be so lucrative for both sides, right?
Yeah.
When you're coming from the person that's, having the experience to the person that's putting on the experience, those people should always be sitting in a room and having those conversations if the world didn't have all these political or, different corporations working together and everything. But
Yeah.
rarely does that happen, right? Because you don't, and I'm generalizing because some of the brands do a really good job with like, research groups and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that actually reminds me, I kind of forgot about it, but prior to that Blake Griffin thing, we tried to do that Finish Line Under Armour thing, right?
Which one was
Was
it?
that prior
Which
to
was it?
in
Which
New
was the finish
Orleans
line
when we
of
did the live stream?
Oh yeah, that was. Gosh, was that?
2013 or 2014?
Jeez, yeah, that and
I don't remember which one came first, but
yeah, that was. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about
it's
that
kind
too.
of crazy how
Oh
far the
man,
technology
I
has caught
forgot
up
we
with
did
us now.
that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that would have been so much easier to do now than it was back then.
Oh
That
yeah.
was that
I
was
mean,
like struggle city to pull that together. Oh my
yeah, I ran down the
gosh.
mall to Radio Shack like 5 times buying different
Yep.
cables and extensions, and it's like, okay, we're gonna make this work. But,
Yep. And
um,
that was before Curry was big. That was before he really blew
that,
up.
that was like right when he signed with Under Armour, and I mean, he didn't even have a shoe, right? It was like the
Right. Yeah, the
the anatomic
anatomics,
spawn, yeah,
anatomic spawns.
whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Wow, man. God, I forgot all about that. Wow.
yeah, well, and it's crazy too because I felt like in that moment I was in over my head. I didn't know, I was leaning on you quite a bit to just make sure that we could figure it all out because
Yep.
I knew that it was what Finish Line should be doing. I knew that Under Armour would greenlight it, but like I really was like intimidated going into that whole event because like you're trying to live stream an event with 4, 5, 6 people on Google Hangouts, but you don't actually have any dedicated internet. We were using basically like the mall Wi-Fi at the time, which
Yeah. Oh
this
my
is
god.
before there are repeaters or mesh networks or anything like that, right?
Yep.
Like it was
Yeah.
very like
Oh.
just seat of the pants, like let's just go for it.
Yep.
Um,
We made it work though. We made it work.
yeah, it turned out pretty good, and I came across some pictures from that maybe a couple months ago, or no, I came across a little short video on my phone because I was actually standing behind Steph while he was taking threes. I don't know if you remember, but the little kid beat him, right? Like
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
missed his last
Yeah.
shot. So I wish I would love to be able to get in touch with that kid, but he was maybe like 8, 10, 11 years old, something like that. And he was just like buckets all the way around this court
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
middle of the mall. And yeah, it was such a good time. And I think kind of spoke to like how we were able to be in the right place at the right time with a lot of this stuff where
Yeah.
everybody's trying to figure it out. And I think now, fast forward 5, 7 years, whatever it's been, a lot of this stuff is just like standardized, experience for marketing and content.
Yep.
So, um, and at that time, like obviously you and I just had a relationship and I mean, I feel like we probably pitched Complex, Finish Line, Foot Locker. I mean, you
All
name it. We
sorts of
probably pitched
ideas.
people ideas, just
Yep.
repeatedly. But from that and kind of from obviously from the Blake Griffin, you were able to move into doing stuff with Kobe in
Mm-hmm.
LA and working with Nike in LA on a lot of really cool projects.
Yeah.
So how did all of that come about? And like on top of that, at what point did you say there's too much of this going on for me to keep up the YouTube stuff? How do I bring in like other people to work on this? Because
Other people to help.
people see you on camera, but there's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes to make all of these things fit into place for you.
Yeah, yeah. To answer the first part of that question, I would say the way the other work started to come is like when people saw the work. I think that's when they're like, oh, we can do some things with him outside of the normal PR sort of thing. And he does have ideas, and he does think about strategy, and he does think about authenticity, and he does think about the business side of things. Like all of that stuff started to kind of fall in play. And it takes, it takes you doing something like that for brands to see that. Oftentimes brands or PR or agencies or marketing or whatever, they need to see you do something in order for them to do something with you. Their job is on the line. Like they have to, as many of us have great ideas, they want to know that you can execute those ideas. And once they saw like the stuff that happened on the Santa Monica Pier, like that's, well, not Santa Monica Pier, the Santa Monica Mall, they kind of saw like, oh, okay, he can help execute an idea and kind of bring it to fruition and do something that benefits the brands. Like that's how that part came along. But as things started to get really busy and started to kind of go over my head, that's when I started to I linked up with the manager. And so I have a manager now that helps with like the business side of things. So I focus mostly on the creative side. Like I stay in tune with the business side just because I want to always be able to learn. And so like that's an important area that I think I need to have access to and to have an understanding of. And my manager handles the rest of the business stuff. Like I don't talk numbers with anybody now. With me now, it's just ideas and that's it. Like I don't talk about any of the numbers, how much things are going to cost, how much my fee is, or any like the terms or any of that kind of stuff. Me, it's just like, all right, this is the idea I have for that. Just because it allows me to kind of live in that space, which is really the space that I should be in. And the technical stuff can be done with somebody else.
Yeah, I think one thing too, just to go back a little bit, there's an interesting piece to this where you kind of got to feel out who you're working with and how your relationship is with all these people, right? Because I remember times where you and I would talk about, part of your growth with YouTube for a while was getting, very limited boxes, cool unboxing stuff, right? But in that early kind of transitioning into YouTube, your transition to YouTube was was kind of, I guess, forced, right? Like
right,
you just were like, I'm going for this. But there was a time where you had to kind of figure out if you were pitching an idea, are you pitching this as yourself doing it, as like bringing a team of people to help me execute on it? Because obviously if you're on camera, you're and you're pitching a big idea, you need other people, potentially doing all this other, behind the scenes work to make it happen. And at that time, like it was almost like you were categorized as a sneaker YouTuber. So people didn't necessarily look at you as someone who could take on a big project. Right.
Right.
And I think that's something that might be good for, like the younger generation to kind of understand how, certain people are viewing you through a certain lens, right? They're viewing you from their job. And if they're not the one that says, hey, go ahead and do this and we can pay you, then that's not the right person to ask. Right. And I'm sure you could probably think of many times where, you presented an idea and then, either didn't get to execute on it or potentially didn't even get to go on the press trip because you were kind of in this weird in-between world of like overly creative and full of ideas, but also they just wanted to make sure that, they were not giving you favoritism for your channel versus other channels and blah, blah, blah. Do you think that go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was a big thing. That was something that one of the, I would say, roadblocks that I ran into is a lot of times these brands, and I don't know if it's authentic or not, but they'll say, oh, well, we can't necessarily do that with you because we don't want to show you favoritism, or we want it to still, like, we don't want people to think that it's tarnishing the relationship or anything like that. And I'm just like, and, I get, from a philosophical standpoint, I get that sort of thing, but in reality, like that's just not how things work. That's not how things work anymore. And like there are influencers doing huge, amazing things, becoming brands of their own. Even before, like this is 4 or 5 years ago, this is already happening. And so like that, it was a tightrope that definitely needed to be walked in certain situations. And it was cause for a lot of frustration. But I think that frustration forced you into like, how do I make what how can I do this on my own, or how can I execute this at some level on my own to get that sort of, to show them the value in it.
Yeah. What would you, I mean, I'm sure young creatives probably still run into that same type of thing. What would you suggest, or do you have any experience in that like you could think of where, maybe just navigating that? Because it's obviously improved greatly in even just like 5 years, like you said.
Yeah,
But
for
I
sure.
feel
For
like
sure.
in my conversations, I am just in this weird spot with all of this stuff, right? Like I'm not typically on camera. The stuff we've
Mm-hmm.
done together, I've been on camera and I'll hop on your videos occasionally, but like I'm not putting out a lot of content to be consumed by consumers. And
Mm-hmm.
most of my stuff is like a part of something else. And what I do to make money is usually behind the scenes in like connecting people or creating content for someone else to
Right.
use for their channels. And it's been an interesting thing for me because I've gone back and forth as to like, should I be more out front and like doing this stuff? But it's not really my nature, right? Like I really just want to help other people do their stuff. Like
Mm.
at this point, like it's a piece of all of it, right? Like I should be creating my own so I can network more. And I will be, and I do. And like that's part of this coming back and bringing this
Right.
back.
Right.
But I
Right.
also,
Right.
at the end of the day, if I had the choice to be creating, have your role in this world of sneakers or have my role, I would still choose mine and kind of just be floating behind the scenes and like connecting people, because that's what I love doing, is creating opportunities for people. But I
Yeah.
think there's still this like really tough water to navigate for creatives, because especially because there's brands looking to like almost latch on to that like next young sensation, right? And
Yeah.
I don't mean to villainize the brands, because ultimately it's just people behind the scenes that you're working with. And it's not this evil entity the way like a lot of people may assume it is based
Yeah.
on their Twitter feed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, could you maybe even give some advice or talk to that a little bit?
The thing that I always tell young creators, because a lot of times people will reach out to me and want to know, how do we work with brands like you work with brands? And you know it, it, there's no simple answer for that. Honestly, it's not like, oh, email Bob at Nike.com. Like that, it's not that simple. A lot of times, like you need to put in the work ahead of time to show them that it's something that's worth spending their time in. Like they're, again, these are people, and if they can't just go to someone who has no content online and be like, oh, okay, we're gonna follow your plan. Like we're gonna do that for the launch of the Curry 7 or whatever, Curry 8, whatever it is. Like you need to have like what like give them something to work with. And I think that is going to make it easier for you. Put together a portfolio, start doing mock commercials or mock activations or mock releases or whatever it is. Like start building that buzz for yourself already, so that if someone looks at your stuff, they go, oh, this guy does know what he's doing. If you want to help a merch brand, develop a line of merch. You know what I mean? Do take the steps necessary. A lot of people just want be like, oh, okay, who is there? Someone I can email? No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. Like I did videos for years before a brand would ever deal with me in that way, where I could pitch them an idea and they'd use it as part of their program. And then you also have to think, these brands are paying agencies $1 million retainers. You know what I mean? And for you to come to pitch them an idea, and they're like, well, why are we paying this retainer? And they have somebody on that at that brand has to justify paying that retainer to that agency. And they can't be like, well, this sneaker blogger from YouTube came up with this idea, and they're like, well, why are we paying this retainer? You're paying this agency $1 million. Like, you got it, So there's a lot of politics involved, but I would say the most important part of the politics is like you putting together work to show them that you understand and that you can do the job.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think I would take it one step further and just say, I mean, just be relentless with the amount of people you're reaching out to and the number of times to
Mm-hmm.
reach out to people, because I, myself, I don't even have a large following online, but it's, relative to like you and a lot of other people, but like it's still massively stressful to try to keep up with all the different places that people are reaching out, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
when you manage, for me, like managing a handful of accounts and then managing a handful of accounts for other people, and then like how do I keep up on all of these things, right? Like there's just so many different places where people can reach out. And I think that I personally, it's not that I don't want to have conversation with everybody that reaches out. It's just that I don't have enough time in a
Yeah,
day
you
to do
can't.
all the things that I need to do.
Yeah, you can't.
So I was trying to think of like, I don't want to get into specific examples, but I was trying to think of like, maybe the first time that you and I kind of went to somebody with an idea, and it must have been complex when I was there, um, which I feel like we basically presented ideas 5 times a week to them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, we pitched a lot, especially on the video side. This was before they were super serious about video. We were pitching all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that to me has always kind of been like the thing of like, although like there are a lot of ideas that I wish we, I mean, there's a lot of ideas that I wish we could have done back then, and there's still some ideas that you and I will bring up and be like, yeah, why haven't we done that yet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We need to go through our emails and be like, oh, whoa, huh, it's a good
but I
idea.
but I think that there's probably, there's this whole there's the nature of like, let's pick on Instagram because it's easy, right?
Mm,
Instagram DMs, somebody sees that you read their message and didn't you don't get back to them, right? So the perception on the person that sent that message, because I've been there too, is that, oh, they saw it and they didn't think it was a good idea. But like,
mm,
I feel like you could present 1,000 ideas and probably only get 1 to 2 of them to take action, mainly
yeah,
because when you're, for me, like, and you and I in our working relationship with just coming up with concepts and ideas, I mean, there's got to be 100, 1,000 that we've discussed, and we've, found some that work and found some that don't. But I don't think that any of those were bad ideas, and I think that's one of the things that the younger creatives could look at and say, look, there's a lot of opportunity to just continuing to ask and finding new people to ask, because to your point, if you've shown that you can do these things, whether that's on your personal channel or publicly, or you sent that, unlisted video and said, hey, this is what we want to do for you.
right.
Sometimes it takes knocking on that door 10, 20 times before the right person answers and says, you know what, why didn't we do
Yeah,
this earlier?
yep.
And I
Like, I
think
mean,
that's a
that's
really
yeah. I was gonna say
interesting
that
part
goes
of
to that
this.
spirit of like just not giving up. And this, but this also leans into something else. Like, why are you doing it? Like, if you're doing it for the money, or you're doing it for the fortune, for the fame, like those are the wrong reasons. I'm not saying that can't inspire you to do some amazing things, but those are the wrong reasons to do it, because like, and I've said this before, when you start creating, like, nobody cares, and you have to
Yep.
be okay with that. You have to be okay with the fact that nobody cares. And if you're creating for the just to get likes or for the social clout, you're going to be disappointed really soon. On a very rare occasion, does someone hit a home run on the first pitch, but more often than not, it's going to take you a bunch of swings before something really pops off. And you need to be able to do that and be okay with that. Be okay with having 10 views on a video or 2 likes on a post, for months, or and maybe even years, but being okay with that, because you're not creating for the money, and then eventually the money will come. So just be cognizant of that.
Yeah, I think that leads me into another part of this conversation is, the perception for a lot of people is probably that, once you get to X amount of subscribers or X amount of followers, that everything you do is a success. So talk a little bit about your experience with that, because I have my own experience with that, just simply on like Instagram, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
at some point I had X amount of followers and I got, a pretty large percentage of interaction out of those followers. And as time has changed and you move away, for me personally, move into more personal Instagram as opposed to just sneakers all the time, the number of people that actually see the stuff that I post is just, minimal
Yeah.
compared to what it used to be. But
Yeah.
like, that happens in your world on YouTube too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think it happens on every platform. If you've been on the platform for a long time, you have to think how different the world was 10 years ago. So people that followed you 10 years ago for a certain reason aren't going to follow you the same for the same reasons today. Someone followed you for sneakers back in 2010 or whenever it was Twitter first started. In 2020, they're not 13 anymore. They're 23. And or if they were 23 then, they're 33 and they're in a different phase of their life. So your content may not resonate with them the same way that it did when they were in high school or when they were in college or when they were in elementary school or whatever it was. So those are all things you have to consider. And you see these people with these large followings and they don't have a ton of likes or whatever it is. A lot of it is because a lot of their following are people that have been there for years and decades. And that's why it doesn't necessarily resonate. Their content doesn't resonate with that audience or with that person anymore. It doesn't mean their content is any less qualified or good or anything like that. It's just a matter of how old their audience is or where their audience is changing or where the trends have shifted. Sometimes it's just that a creator hasn't shifted with the times and they're still creating the same content they were doing 10 years ago. And people are kind of over that. You have to realize creating content, you have to kind of stay relevant to the times and not that you need to change your content, but you need to recognize the way that people look at content and not change your voice, but create in a way that resonates still with the current generation.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's spot on too. I feel like, you know, I I don't, like, you and I as friends all these years, I don't even remember the last time we had a conversation about what we thought about shoes. Like,
Oh
we
gosh.
almost never talk about actual physical shoes, right? Like, we never talk about
Yeah.
a pair of sneakers. I mean, sometimes when we're doing when we're creating content around it, yeah, we're obviously going to talk about things here and there. But like, my relationships have evolved so much in that too. Like, sneakers for me is just a conduit to like talk about more important things. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the next, the future of this podcast is hopefully going to become that, where I have all these incredible relationships with people in the sneaker world. I don't necessarily get to talk to them regularly enough, and
Mm-hmm.
I only consume, sneaker content from a handful of people and on a regular basis. And then I kind of check in with everybody else, every week or two or month or whatever,
Yeah.
based on like what my relationship is. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to think about the evolution of all of these platforms and the followings. And, eventually, like, you have people that you connected with maybe because of sneakers, but you grow apart in that
Yeah.
sense, right? Like, if
Yeah.
that person goes into, you know college or having kids or beyond, right? Like, all those things in life take you away from being talking about it 24/7.
Yep.
So maybe that person only hops into the sneaker world, once a month or something, and they'll catch up on your video, or they'll, maybe have a shoe that they actually like. But at the end of the day, their priorities have changed too. And I think that's been something that I've really been, like, very aware of in this whole
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, and the way things have changed. Because I personally, I mean, I'm surrounded by shoes. Like, I love sneakers, but I love what they've done for me and the people they've connected me with. I don't care about the physical shoes the
Yeah.
way that the 17-year-old me who couldn't get them cared about them. And
Right.
once you figure out how to get your hands on them and buy them and, you know, make your money and all that stuff in life, you kind of evolve into like, well, I want to make a bigger difference. So for me, this pandemic has also shifted the way I've thought, because a handful of guys on the Sneaker History podcast have reached out and just said, hey, thanks for creating these podcasts, because I still got
Wow.
to go to work. And this is something that gives me the escape from what's going on in the world.
That's dope.
And that was like such a like emotional thing for me, because for a long time, I mean, you know, I've talked to you about it. Like, I've struggled with like, do I want to keep doing all this stuff? Like, what is the
Yeah.
point of all this stuff with sneakers? Because at the end of the day, you know, we don't need to consume as many sneakers as we do. And,
Right.
you know, I don't have enough days to wear all the sneakers that I have. And it's like, obviously love giving back and introducing people to job opportunities and, you know, that kind of stuff. And sneakers for me has been the way that I could get in the door with a lot of these brands, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
outside of the big 3 or 4. I've
Yeah.
got a lot of those other brands, and I can say, look, I've been around supporting you for a really long time.
Right.
How can we work together? Or what conversations can we have to further this relationship? And sometimes that's just in an effort to get somebody else an opportunity to talk to one of those brands or one of those retailers.
Yeah.
But I never really thought of what I'm doing, because I don't have like the massive audience like yourself or some of these other creatives. I don't really think about it in that way. I mean, we have a decent amount of people listening to the Sneaker History podcast now, but it's so small in relation to the numbers on YouTube, and you know, the podcasts that I
Yeah.
listen to are very inspirational and they have massive followings and all that stuff, but like it's not sneaker related. So
Right.
I never really thought of where I was at in that space to like be that escape for people. And it made me kind of shift and think, how can I do that where, you know, how can I take this podcast and turn it into a more personal, more in-depth way to let people dig into like who you are, and, you know, me kind of feel personally get to feel like I'm having more poignant and, you know, inspirational conversations. So I think it's really dope that, you know, like we were able to connect and kind of do this. And I really
For
wanted to
sure.
start
For
with you
sure.
once I started thinking about this, because obviously you're continually an inspiration to me. I still want to be a rapper like you. I still want to be a
Ah.
sneaker YouTuber like you.
Ah.
But honestly, like, I just
Oh.
love these kind of conversations. And this, even though we're recording it and it will get published someplace, is very similar to like some of our conversations that just
Yeah.
happen naturally, where it's like just finding our way in all of this stuff. So that said, where do you see yourself in this in the next 5, you know, I mean, it's
Hmm.
hard to say. 5 years is a long time, right? If you think back 5 years,
Yeah.
but like,
5 years
what's the
is a long
future
time.
of your kind of journey with YouTube and with sneakers and all of that stuff? And what's like the dream for you to, you know, maybe like where you see it at, and like the aspirational, somebody just, you know, says, hey, the power is yours, you do anything in the world you want to do in regards to sneakers and YouTube, what do you do next?
God, there's a lot of parts to that. So in the next 5 years, I'd like to direct a sneaker commercial, whether that's like the Foot Locker Week of Greatness or the rollout of the Kanye XX50 or whatever it is. I'd like to direct a sneaker commercial. I think that would be awesome. I'd like to continue what I'm doing on YouTube. I think that's always kind of going to be there. I'd like to do a sitcom about sneakers in some way. Obviously, a sitcom about people, but sneakers be the you know, the conduit, as you say. Um, I want to be I want to do a movie. I want to be like in a movie and like represent like the, like show people that you can go from YouTube to being in a movie and like be a sneaker guy, and like it's all part of the process. Um and I think kind of just continue doing what I'm doing, helping out brands with marketing and stuff like that. You know, doing crazy unboxings, uh, you know, and really kind of engaging with the community. You know, I'm doing hosting a lot. I want to do a little more hosting. Like I host 2 shows on Snapchat, like just kind of hopefully bringing that, and like really just bridge the gap between like traditional and digital, in a way that keeps it authentic to me, and is able to really show the potential for whoever the next generation is going to be. That, like, don't let YouTube be the end all be all, because there's so much more out there, and push yourself to tell stories and keep it authentic in your own personal way, and use your own voice, because that's really what's important. So I guess in a sense, keep doing what I'm doing, but take those opportunities up a notch if possible.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of makes me think. There was I forget, it's like the Forbes 30 under 30 or something, and uh, I think David Dobrik was on there as a TikTok star. And I just thought, well, I knew him on YouTube first, right? But
YouTube,
like he's been
right?
very successful. But it made me think, as you were saying, there's obviously, we've talked about this a lot over the years, where there's the kind of creating for the, you know, vertical Snapchat experience, and then there's the creating for, your traditional film and YouTube on a TV at least. Do you have a preference between those two at all, or do you see? I mean, Quibi was supposed to be that, in between,
Yeah.
but that's not there anymore. So where do you see like those kind of things going? Do you think that people will be consuming more of this on their phones, or
Yeah.
will we eventually kind of get to the point where all of us are having folding tablets that are larger screen in our pocket kind of thing?
Yeah, augmented reality, looking in through our glasses. I think all
Yeah,
of that. I think obviously it's trending more to a more individualized experience, as opposed to like the community experience, which is what TV and which is what like the movies are. I think the experience is definitely going more towards the individual, but I don't think anything is going to go away anytime soon. TV's not going away anytime soon. Movies aren't going away anytime soon. And vertical, social content isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So I think all three are four, depending on how you look at it, of those things will continue to exist in tandem. It's just a matter of how the generation consumes that content, which is where it'll be seen.
gotcha. How
Yeah.
how do you, or what would you suggest for kind of that, like, aspiring sneaker YouTuber in regards to all of those different platforms? It can be overwhelming to try to keep up on all of them.
Oh yes, yes, for sure.
And, like we've talked about that many, many times, but like, if you were to say, 16-year-old, Jacques right now, like what, what would you suggest to that, like, next generation, as far as deciding on those platforms, and where they put their energy and efforts into, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I would just tell just to create, wherever it is you feel comfortable, or on all of them, just create. Like, don't worry about what it means or who's seeing it, or what the numbers look like. Just create. Like don't let don't let the social, or no, I shouldn't say so. Don't let the clout perspective of it cloud your creative process. Whether some people likes it, like whether you get 15 likes or 1,500 likes, that doesn't mean it was good or bad. Like that's not the bar. Like, don't let the likes or the engagement be the bar of whether or not you create a good content. There's plenty of people that you have never heard of that create great content, that are doing tons of things behind the scenes that you never even know about. So don't let the engagement or the likes be the bar. Let your own creative energy and your own creative pursuit of that pure vision of yours, let that be the bar of whether it's good or not.
That's something I need to keep in mind myself, I think.
Oh,
I
same. I
feel
need to keep
like
it in mind myself. Same here. Same here. Same here. It's easier said than done, for sure. So let's say that it's easier said than done.
yeah, for sure. um I guess that's probably it. Is there anything else that you specifically want to talk about? And
No, just thank you for having me on the podcast, man. Obviously we're friends, and I love what you do, and you're a very respected voice in the community, and I'm always happy to be able to support, and very thankful that that I can actually call you a friend, and that we've been able to work together all of these years. And, you know, the hope is obviously that in the future, a lot more opportunities come down the line for us to do things together. And I think it's just a matter of time before those things come, and, you know, we can retire on the beach and not even wear sneakers. We just wear like sandals. we wear sandals and linen. You know what I mean? We wear sandals and linen and fish. You know, that's the life that we live. Or in your terms, like you're in somebody's garage somewhere, tinkering with a wrench, taking some car apart, and adding on some sort of carbon fiber or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because that really is like the gist of it for me is like, how do I just give back, right? Like, even like just in the car world, it's totally off topic, but even in the car world, like the dream for me would be to like, let me just do all this work and like bring people in to help me and put together this stuff, and then be like, here, where's the kid that deserves this? Or, you know, maybe where's the like the dad or the mom that always dreamed of this car, and, you know, I get to gift it to them because I've been able to create around it. But that's you know, obviously for another channel and another day and all of those things. But I think one thing that I wanted to kind of go back on that you said, just, and the reason why I asked kind of where you see the future of all this stuff, because I really do think that you can kind of put that stuff into the universe and make it happen. And we'll have to talk after we stop recording. But I think, you know, there's a good possibility the movie is something that I can connect you with somebody that will definitely want to make that happen with you. So
there we go.
And I think that's part of these conversations, hopefully, is to, you know, like find ways to support each other and connect people and just, you know, make these dreams come true, man. Like, you know, we're only
opportunities there, man.
Older, and now's the time, right? So
absolutely the time, 100%.
So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and I you know, man, I just appreciate you as a friend, and, you know, appreciate what you do, and it's been awesome talking to you. So thanks for spending an hour with me and chopping it up.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. This is it. Make sure you subscribe, link, like, I don't know, do all the stuff you do to a podcast, people. You know what I'm talking about. You know how to engage with it, or, and, you know, engross yourself in the podcast. You know what we're talking about.
Right on. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.